Hi, I'm Bill, the Domestic Monk. Well, thanks again for watching. Here I am in yet another beautiful setting. So I am at Watts Bar Lake is the backdrop here, and then we're at a campground in a city called 10 Mile. I forget the name of the campground here. It's right on the water. Our RV is down there a little bit. Today is Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving to all of you that are watching. What a beautiful day, a little cool out here. It was 30 degrees when I woke up. It's probably about 35 now. Just absolutely beautiful. So I'm here to do my Mass experience from last Sunday, which was Sunday, November 21st. But I want to give a little backstory before that. So the week before, I just posted the video on Blessed Sacrament where we attended the week before in Harriman, Harriman, Tennessee. And we kind of got into this area of Spring City, the Watts Bar Lake area, just by happenstance. Went to Mass there because we wanted to look at a property nearby that we ended up buying, and thanks be to God, our offer was accepted. So we're in the escrow process now. And as always happens, or sometimes happens when a big decision is to be made, sometimes you harbor second thoughts. And we've had a lot of big decisions, right? We sold our house in California. We moved completely away from all our friends and family. I left my position on the city council. Debbie left her job, and we just headed out on this thing. So, we found this house. It's beautiful. It's on 15 plus acres. It's got a beautiful house, exactly what my wife wanted. It's in great shape. It's relatively new. It checked all the boxes. It has a pond on it. I mean, it checked all the boxes of all the things that we wanted. But we woke up the next morning, and my wife was having second thoughts. And and I said, well, and part of the problem is, she's a city girl, grew up in Orange County, California. I mean, you're 2 minutes from everything. I was so lazy, dinner would be, at 3 o'clock, I'd run out to pick up the stuff for that night for dinner. Well, we're out in the country here, and we didn't know much about the area, and she was a little stressed out. And I said, well, let's spend the day driving around. So we started driving around this area, and the 2 towns south on the 27 is a town called Dayton, Tennessee, and that's the county seat, where Spring City is in Rhea County, Tennessee. Back in the 70s, they had the trial on evolution here in the county courthouse there. So, and we didn't know any of that. We found that out yesterday when we opened a bank account right across the street from the courthouse, the old courthouse. So we were in Dayton, and we were just looking for something, maybe get coffee and a muffin or something. And my wife plugs in just a coffee shop. Well, as typical of my wife, she had the phone and the navigation, and she always goes the opposite way. And by the time she realizes it, we had walked, half a block the other way, and we stopped in front of a place called Monkey Town Brewing Company, which is a restaurant and a brewery. And we decided to go in there. Shortly after we went in, this little family, or a mom and her 3 young kids, one was a baby and 2 young kids, a boy and a girl, and then her mother came in, and they happened to sit next to us. And which has proven true with most of the people that I've run into here in Tennessee, they struck up a conversation. Super nice people. And without even meaning to, the conversation just kind of went where it kind of answered all my wife's concerns. We found out then that we're halfway between Chattanooga and Knoxville. We're about an hour from Knoxville, about 45 minutes from Chattanooga. We've been to both places already. And there's plenty of cities in between here, beautiful cities out here like Athens and Sweetwater and Lenoir City, and just all these different little cute towns around here. And then, of course, there's plenty of places to shop, and we've kind of worked all that out over the last week. But we're talking to these folks, and Faith came up somehow, and she asked if we go to church, and I said, well, we're Catholic. And I kind of lead with that because there are a lot of Protestants down here, very engaged and devout Protestants, but I found Catholics you got to look for a little bit harder. But we're having these weird experiences. So she looks over at us and she says, well, we're Catholic. Where did you go to church? And I told her we went up in Harriman and Blessed Sacrament last week. And she says, they live in a place called Soddy Daisy, which is north of Chattanooga. So it's about a little more than halfway between here and Chattanooga. And she told us how it's a beautiful, they attend the Cathedral of Saints Peter and Paul in Chattanooga, downtown Chattanooga. And she said, you got to come check it out. It's a very active parish, very traditionally minded. They do offer the Latin Mass there. So we're like, sure. So that's what we did. Last weekend, we packed up the RV and we stayed at a campground down there. Actually, it's where I shot last week's video. I can't remember the name of the campground, but it also was right on the lake. So we got down there and, you know, it was everything she said it was. It's crazy. I have been to some beautiful Catholic churches on this journey. You know, most notably the Basilica at Holy Hill in Wisconsin. Unbelievable. Our Lady of Good Help in Wisconsin. The St. Mary's Cathedral in Colorado City. Beautiful cathedrals. But I got to tell you, this one might take the cake. Outside, it was beautiful. It reminded me, it's a big brick building in downtown, which is unusual here in the South, right? Usually it's a Baptist church or a Methodist church kind of commanding places downtown. But this thing was a prominent, it's an old building too. I don't know the date on it. I'll put a link to the history. Beautiful old brick church, got a tower on the left side of it as you face it. Concrete frames around the doors, beautiful wooden doors, stained glass windows on the front, beautiful. And around, we parked the RV around to the side, and there's a little Marian devotion area there, a little statue. And there's a school there, and it's just an old, beautiful building. So we went inside, and right when you walk in, it's impressive. Like, my wife was like, wow. I mean, you walk in, well, in the foyer entry area, there's a little icon of Our Lady of Guadalupe up top, and you can kind of see down into the church from there. At this church, I keep talking about the type of architecture I like in a Catholic church. This was it. I mean, 2 rows of pews going straight down, you know, lantern lighting along the ceiling. A beautiful altar. Like, this altar, I mean, we just sat in there and just looked at it. It was like, wow. The altar itself was beautiful. I mean, you know, they had the altar and the tabernacle and the crucifix up top, and that crucifix was just amazing. I've been talking about the different types of crucifixes that we've been seeing over the last few weeks, and they're just getting more and more beautiful. But this crucifix was just dead center, right above the tabernacle, behind the altar, and it was a very anatomically correct crucifix, the corpus on there. It's just beautiful. And then they had a little in the wooden altar, they had a little wooden statue or a carving of St. Peter and St. Paul on either side with a little gold halo. That was pretty cool. And then on either side, so they had a beautiful, so when I was at Our Lady of Good Help, they had the most beautiful Marian statue underneath in the area where the apparition was. Beautiful. This one, they had one over on the left-hand side of this church of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. This is one of the most beautiful statues I've seen. That one up there at Our Lady of Good Help was, I would say they were pretty close to a tie. Just beautiful statue there on the left-hand side of the church. And on the right-hand side of the church, they had a statue of Jesus exposing the Sacred Heart. And to the left of that, on the wall, they had the image of Divine Mercy, and it was the original image of Divine Mercy, which I absolutely love, and I do have a devotion to Divine Mercy, so just beautiful there. And then even more impressive, on either side of the altar, they had these 2 big wooden shelves, for lack of a better term, that housed various saint icons. You could tell because they had the little vessels that they keep them in. And of course, I don't know what they are. I didn't go up there and look. But above, even above the dome, so the dome of the altar and then the dome of the left-hand side and right-hand side, beautiful blue painted ceilings. And up on the top left, you had a picture of the Blessed Mother holding the child Jesus, and over on the other side, you had St. Joseph. Beautiful statues up there. Amazing. It was just, you know, a big wooden altar rail in the front. I mean, that church, that altar was just amazing. You could just sit there and look and look and look. And then it got even better. The stained glass windows along the side, I think there were 8 or 9 along each side. And these things had to be 15 feet tall, arched, beautiful, rich colored stained glass windows with each one depicting some event in the scriptures. Just incredible. I mean, the old wooden pews in that thing, and that church is old. It's built, you know, I'm 6'2", my wife's 5'11". When we knelt down on the pews, your legs are smacking the pews behind you. You had to kind of angle your shins off to the left or right to sit comfortably in there when you're kneeling. Beautiful church, unbelievable. I mean, I talk about the majesty of these churches, but these basilicas and these cathedrals that we have, and this one, for whatever reason, you know, it was a little more raw and older, but just absolutely beautiful. So the attendance, we went to the 9 o'clock Mass on Sunday morning. So they have a 9 o'clock Mass in English, and then they have a Latin Mass at 11 o'clock. It was pretty well attended, and a good mix of young and old. You can tell when you get into a church that's more traditional, because a lot more of the ladies are wearing the veils, and that was very prominent in here. Just a beautiful Mass, well attended. I want to talk about the music before I go any further. So, music is such an integral part of the Mass, and when it's done right, it's amazing. And I've talked about the contrast between these little, smaller, small-town Catholic churches. They just don't have the resources. The buildings themselves don't have the architecture to support the sound like that. But the music in here was unbelievable. They had an orchestra, and back behind, they had a balcony behind, and there was an orchestra with an organ. And the music in this Mass, from beginning to end, can only be described as heavenly. It was unbelievable. Beautiful music. So you had that music, and then you had all of those visual components, the statues, the stained glass windows, the altar. It was majestic, to say the least. The Mass was presided over by one priest and 4 altar servers. So they had 2 younger boy altar servers, which when I grew up, that was the age of all the altar servers. We called them altar boys back then. Don't hold that against me. And then they had 2 older male altar servers too, so we were 4 total. And another thing I loved about this, I loved this when I was an altar boy, and I loved it in this Mass. They were free with the incense. They came in swinging that thing. The priest blessed the altar before the Mass. Before saying the gospel, he got up there and used the incense to bless the good book. And at the end of the Mass, I mean, they were free with the incense in there, and it smelled great. I love the smell of incense, so that was amazing. And on top of that, when the priest read, he didn't read the gospel, he chanted it. And even he had an amazing voice. Like when he opened the Mass, he was chanting all of his lines, and then at the gospel, he chanted the whole thing. It was amazing. It really was. Last week was the Feast of Christ the King, and the homily was good. It was basically about rededicating ourselves to the truth, how there is so much untruth being propagated in the world today, and that God is truth, and that we need to rededicate ourselves to Christ the King. It was a pretty long homily, but it was a good one. You know, I hearken back to when I was at Blessed Sacrament, and I saw that blurb in the bulletin from Pope Francis. 10 minutes, keep it to one theme. That's usually plenty for a homily. So if there was one downside to the Mass, for me it was a homily, but even then it was a good homily. It was just a little long. And another thing I wanted to talk about in this Mass were the ushers. They were looking strack. I mean, these guys all had suits on. They had a big gold sash that said usher on them. I saw several of them with Knights of Columbus. But, you know, that's typical. The Knights of Columbus, I mean, I don't think there's a church operating without the Knights being involved, at least in some way, in almost every ministry. But they looked great. You know, in the more traditional churches, you find people tend to dress a little better, and that was the case here. Communion was conducted by two priests. So another priest came up to assist with the communion. He wasn't on the Mass. He didn't co-preside over the Mass, but he came out, and they had the communion rail, so it was great. Each side went up. You knelt down, just like we used to do in the old days, and you could receive on the tongue or in the hand, and that was beautiful. No Eucharistic ministers, just handled by the priests. And, you know, it was a pretty full Mass in a pretty big church, and I prefer that. I mean, you know, there's a role for the laity in the Mass, but I think handling the body and blood of Christ should be done by a priest. That's my preference. So the closing of the Mass, you know, around the country we're getting different ways. Sometimes they do the St. Michael prayer, sometimes St. Michael and the Hail Mary, sometimes no closing prayer, just the announcements. But on this one, the priest said the closing announcements, and because it was a feast of Christ the King, there's a partial indulgence for praying the consecration to the Sacred Heart. So we did that, and then we said the St. Michael prayer, and we closed with the Year to St. Joseph prayer. So, and that's almost, I think December 8th is the end of the Year of St. Joseph, which, wow, how fast did that go? I mean, if you're following this video, St. Joseph is my patron saint, and I have a devotion to him, and so it was great to see that. What an amazing experience. What an amazing church. Just incredibly beautiful. So now it comes decision time. You know, so we're out here, we put an offer in on a property. My wife loved that. She's like, we need to come here. I'm like, well, you know, 45 minutes is a long way to go to attend Mass religiously. Like, it's beautiful to have that Mass close, you know, close enough to get down there to attend periodically. But one of the things you know, I was involved a little bit. I was involved with the Knights, and I was involved on the Bishop's detail, security up at Christ Cathedral in Garden Grove, and you know, I was involved. And we got to determine, factor those things in when we're finding a parish. I mean, a parish that's 45, 50 minutes away, it's very difficult to be involved. And so over the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing videos like I did on the one on Blessed Sacrament. There are a few other churches around here. There's a St. Mary's, there is a St. Catherine. So I'm going to start going to those churches. I want to find some place that's close where I can get plugged in and, you know, help out with the church again. That's one of the very important things to me. And so I guess that'll be the process over the next few weeks, trying to determine where we best fit, you know, just being guided by the Holy Spirit, listening, discerning which of the churches in this area. All of them are about 20 miles from where our house is, roughly in that neighborhood, 18 to 25 miles, finding out which one really speaks to us. I have no doubt that decision will be made clear, just like everyone since my wife came home and said, you know, let's put the house up back on, I think it was Father's Day weekend, 6 or 7 months ago. So I'm looking forward to that. But getting back to this video, the Basilica of St. Peter and Paul in Chattanooga, Tennessee, a beautiful church, a very vibrant, very devout parish, beautiful. Like, I've been to numerous churches, and the interior of that church, you could just sit there and look and look and look, and I've got that whole book to read, because every one of those stained glass windows, every one of those icons, every one of those statues has a particular meaning and reason for it's in that for why it's in that church, and I'm looking forward to learning those things. So if you stayed this long, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And until next time, and as always, siempre adelante.